Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance was developed by Platinum Games almost a decade ago, when Konami approached them about making a title in the Metal Gear series making use of their distinct take on action combat. Technically, Konami themselves had already made their own attempt, but it didn't quite make the cut. Alright, hey, don't forget to subscribe. A title based around the adventures of Raiden as a cyborg ninja was a winning formula to begin with, but after throwing Platinum into the mix, the end result was a game that almost had no right being as good as it was. It won over plenty of Metal Gear stealth boys to the stylish action genre, and existing fans of said genre were all for it. In fact, for several Devil May Cry fans specifically, it presented a better alternative to the most recent Devil May Cry game released a month prior. The story was both wacky as hell and actually surprisingly philosophical and important to Raiden's growth as a character. The bosses were so good, they reminded me of DMC3's incredible lineup with how enjoyable and varied they were. In fact, it kind of makes me think of like a better Dirge of Cerberus, and while the game was a little on the short side, it had a fair bit of replay value and a good deal of incentive to improve your skills and master the incredibly high-octane combat. When Metal Gear Rising was released, it made a distinctly positive impact that earned it a loyal following. So why hasn't a sequel been made? Well, there's a bunch of reasons as to why, and that's a lot to get into, so here's a more fun question. What if a sequel was made? The way I see it, there are a number of pretty strong directions to take this one. Let's take a look at the first potential route.
You were the lightning in that rain. You can still shine through the darkness.
The lightning.
As shown in the first game, Raiden sees much of himself in other cyborgs, notably those who were forced into war and have no way out, because he knows what that can do to a person. It might be too late for him, but he'll do everything he can to save those suffering a similar fate. This results in his decision to disobey orders and even the law to do what he believes is right. That decision is then taken to the next step as a result of his fight with Armstrong. Raiden chooses to seek out other PMCs making use of cyborgs, to take them down and rescue their victims. Thanks to firms like Maverick offering legitimate opportunities for cyborgs, the potential consequences of Raiden taking down PMCs are largely mitigated, allowing him to cut loose and fight his own war. So begins our first potential sequel focused around Raiden's quest to take out the major players in the PMC industry. Perhaps World Marshal's new buyer has taken the reins and serves as Raiden's ultimate adversary. Each chapter could be focused around an effort to destabilize and destroy one of several PMCs, rounded off by a unique boss and culminating in taking down World Marshal itself for the final chapter. But what could a sequel have in store for Raiden's deranged alter ego, Jack the Ripper? We've seen Raiden suppress the Ripper, and we've seen him fully embrace it. But what about a route of balance? What if he found a way to both accept and tame the killer within? In fact, him earning some amount of inner peace likely goes hand in hand with that first step of acceptance, which we already saw him achieve in the first game. Raiden understands what he is, and he's done hiding from it, but he can still utilize it for a greater good. To be clear, I don't think Raiden actually needs to be redeemed in any capacity. Most, if not all, of his flaws stem from circumstances beyond his control, and he actively endeavors to do the right thing when the choice is laid out in front of him. The thing is, Raiden himself doesn't seem to agree. He sees himself as little more than a murderer, and Armstrong's sentiment clearly left an impression on him. It was a sobering reminder that he himself is dangerously close to going down a similar path. And I feel that might trigger a desire to better himself, which could lead us to a more focused, self-assured Raiden, a man who acknowledges and utilizes his worst traits in order to turn them into positive ones.
Dawkins wrote about that too, how we can rebel against our genes and memes. Once you're aware of your own memes, you can train yourself to identify and replicate the good ones.
And kill the bad ones.
Right.
As far as gameplay goes, Raiden would doubtlessly gain access to a number of new boss weapons, but what about his base abilities? While the core of his various moves should remain similar so the character still feels familiar, something stands out to me about the controller setup of Revengeance. The B or circle button don't do nothing, in combat at least. It is utilized to interact with the environment, opening doors and what have you, but having that be all the button is used for seems like something of a waste. So hear me out. The player is given a selection of new upgrades they can assign to this button at the start of each mission, lending weight to your decision and allowing you to alter your preferred playstyle. Alternatively, maybe the player could switch between them on the fly, which would remove said weight but would result in a great deal of versatility. Upgrades could include a swift dash that functions as a reliable dodge for when parrying just isn't enough, a powerful blast or punch that shatters armor, a collection of small missiles to keep enemies busy, or a wide-range shock to stun them, that sort of thing. Why yes, this idea was inspired by Devil May Cry 5. There's a massive amount of potential there, and this is only one hypothetical direction for the sequel.
If I die here, the lock on my blade will disable after a couple hours. What happens after that is up to you, Wolfie.
Jetstream Sam's kind of a big deal. Whether it's the winning smile, the laid-back charisma, or the incredible skill he displays, this man waltzed his way into everyone's heart. It's true that Sam was thoroughly defeated by Raiden in the first game, but as we've seen, death doesn't have to be the end, and Metal Gear loves its fake-outs and sneaky twists. So while a prequel would be a technically safer option, we sort of already had a taste of that with the Jetstream DLC, and it would be interesting to see the character taken in a new direction. Hypothetically, let's say Sam's body was reclaimed by World Marshal, who then revived him via full-body cybernetic conversion. Kind of a long shot, but that certainly wouldn't be a first for the series. Seeing an opportunity following Armstrong's defeat, Sam leaves the company and strikes out on his own. Now that Blade Wolf has effectively attained free will, it's possible Sam's philosophy would adapt given his wavering conviction laid in Revengeance, resulting in him following Blade Wolf's lead in a twist of irony given that he was the one who set the wheels of Wolf's eventual freedom in motion.
Your orders are to kill me?
Yes.
Call me biased, but those seem like pretty dumb orders, Bob. Why don't you try thinking for yourself?
For myself.
Sam himself would be free of any guiding hand, and might go about ending war as a business his own way, taking on the best cyborgs out there perpetuating the cycle, while perhaps forming his own PMC to recruit capable fighters to divide and conquer enemy PMCs across the world, similarly to Big Boss himself. In regards to Sam's new capabilities, a fully augmented cyborg body would allow him a number of new tricks, but not only that, he could even gain a controllable ally in the form of Blade Wolf. What makes me think Platinum could make this work? Easy, they already did it in Astral Chain. Successful use of Sam's charge moves could have Blade Wolf attack with him for even greater damage, maybe accessed through an extra charge level. And maybe instead of an energy meter, Sam has let's call it a Wolfie meter. And if it runs out as a result of him taking too much damage, Wolf kinda crumples useless for a while, and probably makes you feel really sad before he comes back online ready to keep fighting. Sam is a solid example of Platinum's ability to create enjoyable brand new characters in this setting, and I think that's an important detail to keep in mind for this next example.
PMCs are in demand once again.
Yeah. Fighting for reasons they don't understand. Causes they don't believe in.
Beg pardon?
No. Nothing.
The third option would likely be the least popular because most people absolutely hate new things. Raiden himself is a testament to that, but Nero has been my favourite Devil May Cry character since he was introduced, so clearly I don't have this issue. Here's where we really get into the speculative nature of that does not roll off the tongue. Speculative sequels. Initially I struggled with the idea of a new protagonist. What could they possibly bring to the table that was unique and interesting, while making sense within the realms of the story? Then it hit me. This is Metal Gear, so let's get wild. How about a character with psychic abilities? Obviously we've seen this with Psycho Mantis, and it was even played around with in Metal Gear Acid. Side note, Metal Gear Acid was awesome, so it's safe to say psychic stuff is kind of a recurring theme. A decent reference to look at here would be Bandai Namco's upcoming game, Scarlet Nexus. Let's take that idea of telekinesis in a high-speed action game and do some platinum things with it. Maybe the character can toss their high-frequency blade like a Jedi, and follow up by zipping towards it like with Monsoon's weapons. This concept basically allows us to play as something akin to Monsoon on steroids, only instead of being limited to magnetic force, we have as much freedom as the character's telekinetic abilities allow us. String enough successful attacks together or stun a target to be given the chance for a well-timed telekinetic pulse in place of blade mode, allowing you to slam them into other enemies or utilize elements of the environment to deal big damage. For their equivalent of Ripper mode, they could fully unleash their abilities, floating above the battlefield and wreaking havoc, flinging their enemies around like ragdolls. It sounds ambitious, but if anyone can pull something like this off, it's platinum. In regards to how this character might fit into the story, let's look at the element of cyborg mercenaries depicted in the epilogue of Revengeance. Given the effects of the war economy, several PMCs employed troops who joined purely due to a lack of any alternative opportunities. Many soldiers simply fought in order to make ends meet, and that doubtlessly goes for mercenaries too. It might make sense for our new hero to be one such individual, someone who fights out of simple necessity. The theme of this character's story could focus on the ideas of putting a price on someone's life, and eventually escaping the cycle of violence, vengeance, and killing for profit. Let's say this new cyborg takes out contracts on various different characters who function as a rogues gallery of bosses, sort of akin to the approach of a normal Heroes game. This would allow for a massive variety of different boss fights, given that they could originate from anywhere and be anyone, with a number of different enhancements, upgrades, and fighting styles. Combine this with our new cyborg's unique telekinesis, and I think we're onto a winner. This mercenary route could even lead them to taking out a contract on Raiden himself and promptly getting their ass beat. But here's another angle: pull a Devil May Cry 5 and do all 3 routes at once! However, such an ambitious approach is not for the faint of heart, and I ain't even done yet. There is another option. Only this would need to be a prequel, and fans of the series probably already know where I'm going with this.
A fight to the death with you. Only in that can my soul find respite.
Grey Fox, baby, the one who started it all. Something that makes this direction very interesting to me is the simple fact that as a cyborg, Grey Fox was never as advanced as Raiden ultimately becomes, meaning that in comparison, we'd likely be playing with more limitations, but there are several ways to innovate with those limitations and turn them into something unique and fun. Despite being shown to be largely unaffected by firearms, it would make sense for Fox to be less overall durable than Raiden, and perhaps incapable of reliably deflecting entire volleys of gunfire, forcing the player to take a more pragmatic approach. We know Grey Fox made use of stealth camouflage, which naturally leans into a greater focus on stealth. While I think that element should be utilized, I don't think it should be the main focus. More deadly enemy encounters would demand players carefully decide which pieces to remove from the board with stealth kills, if not all of them, but there should certainly be at least an equal balance of unavoidable direct combat too. It's also important to note that while Fox may lack the technology of the cyborgs to come, the same can be said of his enemies. He typically fought opponents like genome soldiers, putting him at an immediate advantage. It's part of why he was so obsessed with fighting Snake, because Snake operates on a whole other level. This means that functionally we'd probably be looking at a game more akin to the original concept for Metal Gear Solid Rising, a game featuring human enemies that made use of more methodical, grounded combat. Grey Fox was known for his bursts of instability and psychosis, so his equivalent of Raiden's Ripper mode could equate to him losing control and gaining a tremendous boost in power, with the trade-off being that once it ends, he's gripped by one of his seizures, leaving the player vulnerable if they didn't use it wisely to finish off their opponents or while nearing a phase that leaves them room to breathe. It's worth mentioning that apparently Kojima stated he would like a sequel to focus on Grey Fox fighting nanomachine zombies, the absolute mad lad. Allow me to perhaps present something a touch more grounded. What if we took control of Grey Fox during his escape from Foxhound after being freed by his sister Naomi? This, however, presents a problem. The The scenario doesn't lend itself to varied or challenging enemy types, but this could be mitigated with some creative use of more standard threats to turn them into boss fights. Imagine a platinum boss fight of Grey Fox versus a goddamn tank. Jumping off this idea, the game could feature unique enemy units who specialize in particular areas to serve as bosses, much like the original lineup of Foxhound members. There's a fair amount of empty space here that could potentially be filled with any number of ideas, but ultimately this escape and following roaming of Shadow Moses could lead to the fight with Snake, which I feel would function similarly to facing Jetstream Sam when he's disarmed, and eventually culminate with the final stand against Metal Gear Rex, allowing players a slightly more indulgent face-off for one last boss fight. That about wraps up my concepts for a potential sequel, but I always find this stuff fun to consider, and if you have some ideas of your own, I'd love to see them, so feel free to share. It's genuinely a shame that chances are we're never going to see anything like this in the future, because while this series might cover games I don't always necessarily think need a sequel, I don't think most people would complain in this case. Metal Gear Rising really did deserve another installment, but whatever the case, the fact remains that it's truly one hell of a game. To those looking to scratch the Revengeance itch, I'd recommend you take a look at some of Platinum's other titles. Nier Automata and Astral Chain were seriously fun games that felt as though they utilised somewhat similar formulas. Revengeance might be a memory, but it's a damn good one that continues to influence spiritual successes today, and might even continue to do so in the future, as part of its mimetic legacy. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe or just let me know your thoughts in the comments. You can follow me on Twitter, and if you'd like to support my channel, you can either subscribe to my Patreon or donate directly via PayPal. Links can be found in the description below. Have a great day. I'll catch you next time.